2 weeks after state Democrats unveiled their crime proposals, the Republican plan takes center stage in Annapolis, focusing on juveniles.
And that plan promises more accountability for young offenders, as lawmakers and community leaders say action can't wait.
We need to make juvenile probation mean something.
We have zero teeth to any legislative action right now, any law, to make these parents bring their child in and get the services they need.
This is not something that's going away, and we definitely appreciate some more tools to be able to combat this.
Well, tonight our team of reporters is looking into calls for change in Baltimore and across the state.
We begin with Mackenzie Frost and the juvenile crime conversation on both sides of the aisle in Annapolis.
It's been another marathon day of testimony for juvenile crime bills, this time focusing on more of the Republican-backed plans. But time is ticking for lawmakers to act on any proposal.
That concludes the hearing and the testimony for Senate Bill 73. We'll now move on to Senator Watson.
More testimony Tuesday on a slew of juvenile crime bills. First up, getting the state's attorney's office involved in the conversation about charging kids earlier.
What's happening at the department is not satisfying to our community, and it's just a revolving door of these youth in and out, and absolutely no checks and balances.
Laura Wilt, a prosecutor in the juvenile division in Frederick County, argues right now juvenile crime continues to increase and lawmakers need to make changes to the probation length for certain offenses.
We have no ability to do anything other than recommend services, and that's just not enough in most of these circumstances. Trying to put teeth back in our probation so that hopefully the kids will get the message and stay out of the Department of Correction as adults.
We're now going to move on.
But the debate over the Interrogation Act remains central to some of the friction.
This is one of 4 bills I'll present to you today.
The proposal debated now, backed by Democrat Senator Ronald Watson from Prince George's County, would allow parents to talk to their kids before speaking with an attorney. Supporters of the current law argue it should not be changed because it protects kids' constitutional rights.
Lawyers understand constitutional rights. Not all parents understand that, correct?
That's correct.
So why would we put a child in that jeopardy rather than allowing the law that we've currently passed to be put in place? Why would we do this?
But in the community that I represent, who helped me put this together, they are adamantly in support of wanting to be involved if their child gets picked up and arrested.
Opponents of the law entirely argue
it effectively, quite literally, prevents the questioning of child suspects who are children.
A wholesale repeal isn't on the table this year. Instead, smaller tweaks like giving parents a bigger say in the process and other options are being discussed.
Statements that defendants give are incredible investigative tools.
The Republican-backed Juvenile Justice Restoration Act includes some changes already being debated in the juvenile justice system, like authorizing certain charges involving a gun for kids at least 10 years old.
This is not about demonizing and incarcerating our children or these juveniles. It's about protecting them and protecting our communities.
Ultimately, no votes were taken Tuesday as the conversation continues in Annapolis. This debate is not over. So far, juvenile crime bills in both chambers have yet to make it out of committees, so there could be more amendments made before any plans are finalized. In Annapolis, Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
Department of Juvenile Services Secretary Vincent Schiraldi has not been at any of the hearings about juvenile crime legislation so far this session and was not present when Democrats introduced their package of bills last month. His office won't answer our questions on whether he supports the measures. On WBAL radio this morning, Governor Moore doubled down on his support of Schiraldi.
I wanted to get someone in there who understood how to reform a system, but also understood that the benchmark for the results I want to see are accountability. And that means having real accountability for the young people in the system, making sure there's accountability for people that are breaking the law, regardless of their age, but also making sure we have a system that actually works and can focus on rehabilitation.
Secretary Schiraldi has faced backlash over his views on probation, saying he doesn't believe it makes young people less likely to commit another crime. As Mackenzie mentioned, probation reform is a central aspect of new juvenile crime proposals in Annapolis. We have heard from lawmakers and prosecutors who say judges should have more of a say in the whole process.
Because sometimes we have parents who call us and say, I don't know what to do, he's not listening, and our hands are tied. because we don't have any response other than to set yet another hearing where the child is told by the magistrate or the judge, yet again, you have to follow the rules of probation, and the child has no response.
What's happening is that when someone is placed on probation, the access to services isn't happening quick enough. And so the length of probation could be halfway over or the majority over before they even get enrolled into services.
Fox 45 News has been investigating the Department of Juvenile Services and Secretary Schiraldi for months. You can find our complete coverage online at foxbaltimore.com.
Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates is in Federal Hill addressing juvenile crime during a community public safety meeting. Fox 45's Jeff Abel was at that meeting and joins us live with the state's attorney's message. Jeff?
Well, when it comes to winning the war on juvenile crime, Bates spoke to his own neighbors tonight, and he laid out what needs to be happening in Annapolis and then questioned what he thinks will really happen. At the Foundry Church in Federal Hill, it was the juvenile crime crisis that brought the state's attorney to the head of the church.
Check 1, 2, 3, 4. I explained to him, it's not my goal to lock up kids, but it's my goal to keep the citizens safe.
For more than an hour, Ivan Bates addressed the juvenile crime crisis both on the streets and at the State House, where lawmakers are now struggling to decide whether to reform the reforms from 2 years ago.
My fear is that you have a lot of the confusion down there in Annapolis and nothing passed, and now as prosecutors we're still stuck with our hands tied.
Bates made his case for extending probation for juvenile offenders and making offenders more accountable.
If they're going to cut their ankle bracelet off, you have to tell the court.
I think there's a lot of uncertainty about who's at fault, what's broken, who can address it.
3 young people, 7, 9, and 10, New Year's Eve, try to break into a liquor store on the west side.
Bates described one case involving 3 young offenders, which he says helped illustrate the realities of Annapolis. Senator Jill Carter, who authored juvenile reforms 2 years ago, has long urged law enforcement to issue SINS petitions, which are aimed at helping provide services to offenders and allow them to avoid more punitive action.
The officer comes to me and says, hey, what do we do with this? They're so young. Well, I don't know what to do with this. So do you just say, oh, well, no harm, no foul, or do you try to do something? Well, Senator Carter always talked about this SINS petition. I said, well, let's figure out what SINS really works. I sent them down to DJS headquarters here in the city. Turned out that DJS didn't understand what to do with the SINS petition either. They had no clue what to do about this at all. And what you realize is that so many laws have changed throughout the time period that are the organizations keeping up and educating the people that are in charge of being in charge of these laws.
You may remember at another Federal Hill meeting a few months ago, Juvenile Services Secretary Vincent Schiraldi clashed with a deputy state's attorney over crime statistics. Well, tonight, Bates says Schiraldi later apologized, saying she was correct. We're live. Jeff Abel, Fox 45 News.
Jeff, thanks. Lots of interesting information in your report tonight. That brings us to our question of the day. Who do you trust to handle the juvenile crime crisis, Republicans or Democrats? So far, 90% of those who voted say Republicans. Head to foxbaltimore.com/vote to make your voice heard. Republicans are also pushing to have possession of stolen gun charges reclassified as felonies. The bill has been on the table for a few years now, but has stalled each time in the House. Now public support is growing as the new Gonzalez poll shows 88% of Marylanders support making this crime a felony. Mackenzie Frost sat down with pollster Patrick Gonzalez this afternoon, who says this poll reflects the desire for change in Annapolis.
The Maryland legislature and Maryland voters' minds needs to pass a law that makes possession of a stolen firearm a felony. But this is one of those issues. It's a serious, very important issue. Stop playing. Don't play games. If you, in your heart as a legislator, just can't do it for yourself, please do it for your constituents.
Today's Gonzalez poll addressed Governor Wes Moore's job approval rating as we near the halfway point of his term. 58% of those polled say the governor is doing a good job. 28% disapprove, with 14% giving no response. The governor's approval rating is down slightly from his 60% mark in September's poll, but it is an increase from 55% last June. the first poll after the governor took office.
I'm Kai Jackson. Thank you for watching. Here's another video to watch. Also, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel.